Okay, so picture this. You just got your paycheck. Rent comes out. Car payment comes out. Groceries. Phone bill. That subscription you forgot you still had. And what's left over, if anything, you toss into savings, and you feel okay about it, responsible even. That's the formula you were taught. Income minus expenses equals savings. Simple, right? Here's the thing. That formula is basically financial quicksand. And I don't mean that as a metaphor to sound dramatic. I mean it mathematically keeps you in place while everything around you gets more expensive. Because while you're doing income minus expenses equals savings, the wealthy are running a completely different equation. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So let's talk about what the rich actually do, because it's not what you think, and it's definitely not just save more. First, let's deal with the myth, because it needs to die. The myth is that rich people are just really good at not spending money. Frugal, disciplined, clipping coupons in a mansion. Look, some of that exists, sure, but that's not the mechanism. That's not the formula. If saving harder was the secret, half of America working 2 jobs would already be wealthy. They're not. So clearly something else is going on. Here's what's actually going on. The wealthy don't ask, how much can I save from my income? They ask, how much income can my assets generate? Flip that sentence around in your head for a second, because that's the entire formula. Income minus expenses equals savings. That's the poor and middle class formula. Assets generate income. Income covers expenses. That's the rich formula. Same words, completely different order, completely different outcome. Let me make this concrete, because I know that sounded a little abstract. Say you have $10,000. The average person's brain goes, okay, $10,000. That's a nice cushion. Maybe I pay down some debt. Maybe I put it in a savings account, earning basically nothing after inflation eats it. The wealthy mindset asks a different question entirely. It asks, what can this $10,000 buy that will then generate more money without me trading my time for it again? That's the whole game. Not, how do I hold on to this money, but how do I turn this money into a machine that produces more money? And I know what you're thinking. Easy for you to say. I don't have real estate or a business or a portfolio. But stick with me, because there's a number that's going to bother you a little. According to Federal Reserve data on household wealth, the top 10% of households in the US hold the overwhelming majority of stock market wealth, while most of the bottom half of earners hold almost none of it. That's not because rich people are smarter than you. It's because they're playing a different game with the same dollars. They're not storing money, they're deploying it. Now here's where it gets a little frustrating, because there's a second layer to this that almost nobody explains properly, and it's the part that actually built the big fortunes. It's leverage, meaning using other people's money, usually the bank's money, to acquire assets. So your own cash isn't the only thing working for you. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to move a boulder. You can push it with your own 2 hands. That's your income, your labor, your effort. Or you can use a lever, a long metal bar that multiplies your force. Same boulder, same you, completely different result because of the tool. Debt, used correctly, is that lever. Rich people aren't scared of debt the way we're taught to be. They're scared of bad debt, the kind that funds a depreciating car or a vacation. Good debt, the kind that buys an appreciating income-producing asset. That's the lever they pull constantly. There's actually a well-documented strategy wealthy families use built around exactly this, sometimes called buy, borrow, die. You buy appreciating assets. You borrow against them instead of selling, so you access cash without triggering a taxable sale. And when it eventually passes to heirs, in many cases, the asset's cost basis resets, which can wipe out decades of gains for tax purposes. That is not a loophole for regular people. I want to be honest with you about that. But the principle underneath it, borrowing against assets instead of liquidating them, is something you can actually apply on a much smaller scale, and we'll get there in a second. Here's the part that should honestly make you a little frustrated. The tax code itself is not neutral. Wages, the money you earn from a job, get taxed the hardest, often before you even see it. But capital gains, the money assets make you, especially if you hold them longer, gets taxed at a lower rate. So the formula isn't just about assets versus income, it's about what kind of income. Earned income versus asset income are not treated equally. And once you know that, working harder at your job stops looking like the only lever you have. So what does this actually mean for you today, with whatever you've got? First, stop thinking about savings as the finish line. Savings is not wealth. Savings is fuel. It only becomes wealth once it's converted into something that produces more money without your constant labor. Second, before you buy anything with your extra dollars, ask one question. Does this generate income, or does it just sit there? A car sitting in your driveway generates nothing. A dividend-paying index fund, a rental property, a small stake in a business, those generate something, even if it's small at first. Third, get comfortable with the idea of good leverage on a small scale. That might just mean understanding how a mortgage on a rental property works, or how margin works in a brokerage account. Carefully, not recklessly. The goal isn't to gamble. The goal is to understand the tool the wealthy have been using for generations, so it stops being mysterious and starts being available to you. And fourth, and honestly, this is the one people skip. Protect your time. Every hour you spend trading time directly for money is an hour that formula, income minus expenses, stays exactly the same. But every asset you acquire keeps working while you sleep, while you're at your actual job, while you're doing literally anything else. That's not a cliche. That's the entire mechanical difference between the two formulas we talked about today. Look, none of this happens overnight, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you'll flip the switch tomorrow and suddenly you're running the rich person's formula with a fully loaded portfolio. That's not realistic. What is realistic is this. The next time money comes into your hands, instead of asking, "What do I need to pay?" first, ask, "What can this become?" first. That one shift in order, that's the beginning of the whole formula changing in your favor. Because the truth is, the rich aren't hoarding some secret you'll never get access to. They're just running a different equation with the same starting number. And now you know what it is. The only question left is whether you're going to keep doing the math the old way, or start doing it theirs. Look, none of this happens overnight. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you watch one video and tomorrow you're running the rich person's formula with a fully loaded portfolio. That's not how this works, and honestly, anyone who tells you it is trying to sell you something. Here's what is realistic. The next time money lands in your hands, whether it's your paycheck, a bonus, a tax refund, whatever, don't let the first question be, "What do I need to pay?" Let the first question be, "What can this become?" That's it. That one shift, in that order, is the entire difference between the two formulas we just walked through. Because here's the truth. The rich aren't hoarding some secret vault you'll never get access to. They're not smarter, and they're definitely not luckier than you in some magical way. They're just running a different equation with the same starting number everybody else has. Income. That's it. That's the whole starting point. What they do with it after is the only thing that's different. So the only real question left is which formula you're going to run from here. Are you going to keep doing income minus expenses equals savings and hope it eventually adds up? Or are you going to start asking what your money can become and let it start working the way theirs does? You don't need $10,000 to start thinking this way. You need the question. Ask it every single time money touches your hands from now on, and watch how differently your decisions start to look in 6 months. If this actually shifted something for you, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel is built around, breaking down the money stuff nobody explained to us properly. Subscribe if you want more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.